This is one story you'll never forget. Hey, listen. Before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. A woman in a light blue uniform was standing at the edge of the Eiffel Tower, and the woman she worked for, the woman wearing red, had her hand on her back. Not to steady her, push her. What happened in the next 10 seconds would be talked about for the rest of both their lives. And the reason it happened, nobody could have guessed it. Not even me. Stay with me. This gets unbelievable. Welcome back everyone to the channel where real stories touch real hearts. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Which country do you call home? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Today's story is about loyalty, betrayal, and a secret that stayed buried for 15 years until one moment on top of the world forced it into the light. It's emotional, shocking, and by the end, you'll understand why some people fight so hard to keep their past hidden. Let's begin. Nobody in Ridgefield, Connecticut, knew Maya Bennett's real story. They knew her as the quiet woman who cleaned the Whitfield estate 3 days a week, who never complained, who always arrived early and left late, who kept her head down and her voice soft. She was 34 years old, single, and lived in a small rented apartment above a laundromat on the edge of town. Her car had 200,000 miles on it. Her coat was 5 years old. And yet, if you looked closely, really looked, you'd notice something strange about Maya Bennett. She never once complained about her life. Not when her paycheck was late. Not when Mrs. Whitfield snapped at her for a wrinkle in a tablecloth. Not even when she worked through Thanksgiving while the family sat 20 feet away, laughing, eating, celebrating. Maya simply worked. And she watched. And she waited. The Whitfield family had built their fortune in real estate, 3 generations deep, with a mansion that looked more like a European palace than a Connecticut home. Richard Whitfield, the current patriarch, was 61, silver-haired, and one of the most respected businessmen on the East Coast. His son, Daniel Whitfield, 36, was the heir apparent, handsome, charming, and according to every magazine that covered him, New England's most eligible bachelor, until 8 months ago, when he got engaged to a woman named Vivian Cross. Vivian was beautiful in the way that made rooms go quiet. Tall, blonde, always dressed like she'd stepped off a runway. She'd come into Daniel's life fast, meeting him at a charity gala, marrying her way into headlines within months. The Whitfield family loved her. The tabloids loved her. Everyone loved her. Everyone except Maya. Maya never said a word against Vivian. Not once. But every time Vivian entered a room, something changed in Maya's eyes. A flicker, a tightening around her jaw, something that looked almost like recognition. Like she was seeing a ghost. It started 3 weeks before the trip to Paris, on a rainy Tuesday when Maya was polishing the silver in the dining room and Vivian walked in unannounced, phone pressed to her ear, arguing with someone in a hushed, venomous voice. "I told you it's handled," Vivian hissed. Nobody remembers her. Nobody even knows her real name anymore. Maya froze, polishing cloth still in her hand, heart suddenly pounding so loud she was sure Vivian could hear it. Vivian noticed her a second too late. Her face shifted instantly. The venom disappeared, replaced by that same magazine cover smile. "Oh, Maya. I didn't see you there." She ended the call immediately. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." Maya nodded, said nothing, and went back to polishing silver that didn't need polishing anymore. But her hands were shaking. Because Maya knew exactly who Vivian Cross used to be. And Vivian had no idea that Maya knew. 15 years earlier, before the designer dresses and the charity galas and the name Vivian Cross, there had been a different young woman. A young woman from a small town in Ohio, a young woman who had once had a best friend. A young woman named Rachel. Maya's little sister. Maya's chest tightened every time she thought about it. 15 years of silence. 15 years of not knowing exactly what happened to Rachel, only knowing that she'd disappeared after a trip with a girl named. Maya's mind reached back through the fog of memory. A girl who went by a different name back then. A girl whose face, underneath the makeup and the surgery and the new blonde hair, was unmistakably the same face now smiling for photographers on Daniel Whitfield's arm. Maya had taken the housekeeping job at the Whitfield estate 4 months ago, right after she'd seen Vivian Cross's engagement announcement in a magazine at the grocery store checkout line. She'd stood frozen in that aisle for almost 10 minutes, staring at the photo, her whole body going cold. It was her. After 15 years, it was her. Maya hadn't taken the job for the paycheck. She'd taken it to get close. To what? To find proof. Because the police had closed Rachel's case 11 years ago, ruling it a runaway situation, no foul play suspected, no evidence, no leads. But Maya had never believed that. Rachel would never have simply vanished without a word. Not from their mother, not from Maya, not without warning. And now the woman Maya suspected had something to do with it was about to become the newest member of one of the wealthiest families in America. In 3 weeks, the whole Whitfield family, including Maya, brought along to help manage the trip, was flying to Paris for the engagement photo shoot at the Eiffel Tower. A photo shoot meant to appear in 3 major magazines. Maya didn't know yet what she would do with what she knew. She only knew she couldn't let it disappear into a magazine spread and a fairy tale wedding. That night, Maya sat on the edge of her bed with an old water-stained photograph in her hands. 2 teenage girls laughing on a porch swing, arms around each other, the whole world still ahead of them. On the back, in her sister's looping handwriting, Rachel and Maya, summer forever. Maya pressed the photo to her chest and whispered into the empty apartment. "I'm going to find out what happened to you. I promise." She had no idea that in 3 weeks, 600 feet above the streets of Paris, that promise would nearly cost her everything. The flight to Paris felt like stepping into another world. Maya had never been on a private jet before. She sat quietly near the back, arranging garment bags and travel folders, while Richard Whitfield reviewed documents in first class and Daniel scrolled through wedding venues on his tablet, occasionally glancing at Vivian with a kind of adoration that made Maya's stomach twist. Vivian sat curled against the window, sunglasses pushed onto her head, sipping champagne, looking every bit the woman who had everything. Maya studied her from a distance the way she had for 4 months now. The shape of her jaw. The particular way she laughed. A short, sharp exhale, almost a bark, that she quickly softened whenever she remembered someone was watching. It was the same laugh. 15 years hadn't changed it, no matter how much the rest of her face had. Paris in early June was golden and warm, the whole city bathed in soft light. The Whitfields checked into a hotel near the Champs-Élysées, and the next 3 days were a blur of appointments. Florists, jewelers, wedding planners, a photographer named Etienne who kept talking about capturing the light of true love, while Maya carried garment bags up and down hotel hallways. On the second night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her small staff room, looking out at the city lights, and finally did something she'd been too afraid to do for 4 months. She opened her laptop and searched one more time for anything. Any thread, any lead. Connecting Vivian Cross to a girl named Rachel Bennett from Millbrook, Ohio. Nothing came up, same as always. Vivian Cross's public history began exactly 9 years ago, when she appeared in New York as a marketing assistant at a fashion startup. Before that, nothing. No school records searchable, no old photos, no social media. It was as if she'd been born at 25 years old. That kind of erasure didn't happen by accident. Maya knew that much. She thought back for the 1000th time to the last real conversation she'd had with Rachel. It was a phone call 15 years ago, Rachel's voice tight with excitement and something else. Nerves, maybe, or fear. "I met someone, Maya." She's going to help me start over. New city, new job, everything. I finally feel like my life is about to begin. 2 weeks later, the calls stopped. Rachel's apartment was empty, her things gone, no forwarding address. Their mother called the police. The police found a note in Rachel's apartment, in Rachel's handwriting, saying she needed a fresh start and not to look for her. Case closed. But Maya had always noticed one detail that nobody else seemed to care about. Rachel hated writing notes. She always called. Every time, no matter what, she called. A note wasn't like her at all. Maya closed her laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. 15 years of carrying this alone. 15 years of a mother who cried herself to sleep every June, the month Rachel vanished, until she passed away 3 years ago, still believing her daughter was somewhere out there, simply choosing not to come home. Maya had never believed that. Not for one single day. The next morning, everything changed by accident. Maya was organizing the closet in Vivian's hotel suite, hanging gowns for the shoot, when a small leather box tumbled from the top shelf and spilled its contents across the floor. Old photographs, a few papers, a folded newspaper clipping yellowed with age. Maya's heart stopped as she knelt to gather them. One photograph showed 2 young women, arms around each other, laughing on a beach. One of them was unmistakably Rachel. Younger, thinner, but Rachel's exact smile, Rachel's exact eyes. The other woman next to her was younger too, blonde already but with a different nose, a different jaw. Still, unmistakably, the woman who now called herself Vivian Cross. Maya's hands trembled so hard she nearly dropped the photo. She turned it over. In pen, faded but legible. Rachel and Nicole, Ocean City, 15 years ago. Nicole. That had been her name once. Vivian Cross had been Nicole. Maya heard footsteps in the hallway and shoved the photograph into her apron pocket just as the door opened. Vivian walked in, stopping short when she saw the scattered contents of the box on the floor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Vivian's eyes moved slowly across the papers, the clippings, and then landed on Maya's face, searching, calculating. The box fell, Maya said, voice barely steady. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up. Vivian knelt slowly, gathering the papers herself, her expression unreadable. But as she reached for the last item, a folded newspaper clipping, her eyes flicked up to meet Maya's, and something in them went cold and sharp, like a door slamming shut. You know, Vivian said softly, almost pleasantly. You remind me of someone I used to know. Maya's blood ran cold. Is that right? Vivian tucked the box under her arm and stood, smoothing her dress. A long time ago. Different life. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Funny how the past has a way of following people, isn't it? She left the room without another word, and Maya stood frozen in the empty suite, the stolen photograph burning in her apron pocket, suddenly certain of 2 things. Vivian Cross knew exactly who she was. And now Maya was no longer safe. The photo shoot was scheduled for the top platform of the Eiffel Tower at golden hour, when the light over Paris turned the whole city amber and pink. It was meant to be the crown jewel of the engagement announcement. Daniel and Vivian, framed against the most romantic skyline in the world, launching their fairy tale across magazine covers everywhere. Maya almost didn't go. She'd thought about faking sick, staying behind at the hotel, putting distance between herself and Vivian after what had happened the day before. But Richard Whitfield specifically requested she come along to manage wardrobe changes, and refusing without explanation would only draw suspicion. So Maya rode the elevator up with the rest of the crew, the photograph of Rachel and Nicole folded carefully in her coat pocket, her heart hammering with every floor. The top platform was smaller than Maya expected, wind-whipped and dizzyingly high, the city spread out below like a painting. Etienne, the photographer, was already directing Daniel into position near the railing, testing angles, chattering about the light. Vivian stood off to the side in her red gown, being fussed over by a makeup artist, and every so often her eyes cut toward Maya with a coldness that made Maya's skin crawl. "Maya!" Vivian called out suddenly, voice light and pleasant for anyone listening. "Can you help me with something?" Away from the crowd. Maya's stomach dropped, but there was no graceful way to refuse in front of everyone. She followed Vivian along the platform, past a maintenance section roped off from the chute, to a quieter stretch near the tower's edge where the railing was lower and the wind stronger, the crew's chatter fading behind them. "You have something of mine," Vivian said, the pleasantness gone from her voice now, replaced by something flat and dangerous. "I want it back." "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya said, though her hand instinctively pressed against her coat pocket. Vivian's eyes followed the movement. "Don't insult me. I saw your face yesterday. I know exactly who you are, Maya Bennett. You have your sister's eyes. I noticed the first week you started working for us. I just couldn't believe it. What are the odds?" She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Rachel's older sister, cleaning my future husband's house. It's almost poetic. Where is she?" Maya's voice cracked, 15 years of grief and fear breaking through all at once. "Tell me where my sister is." "She's gone, Maya." Vivian's voice was suddenly, chillingly gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. "She's been gone a long time. She made a choice, and I made a choice, and I'm not going to let either choice ruin what I've built. Do you understand me? I have worked too hard for too long to become somebody who matters. I am not going to let a photograph and a housekeeper's grudge take that away." "A grudge?" Maya's voice rose, shaking. "My mother died still crying for her. You let us believe she abandoned us. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything to her," Vivian snapped, and for just a second, real emotion cracked through the composed mask. Something raw, something almost like grief of her own, quickly buried again. "She made her own decisions. I just helped her disappear when she needed to. That's all. And then I built a life. My life. And you are not going to take it from me." The wind gusted hard across the platform. Maya took a step back, suddenly aware of how close they were to the railing, how few people could see them from this angle, how the crew's voices sounded so far away. "Give me the photograph," Vivian said quietly, closing the distance between them. "And walk away. Quit your job tonight. Go back to your small life in Connecticut, and I promise you nothing bad will happen to you. But if you try to tell anyone, if you try to ruin this for me, you'll what?" Maya said, chin lifting, fear and fury mixing together into something that finally, after 15 years, felt like courage. "Push me off the Eiffel Tower." Something shifted in Vivian's eyes. A flicker of panic, quickly hardening into resolve. "Give me the photograph, Maya." "No." What happened next took less than 4 seconds, though to Maya it felt like an eternity. Vivian lunged forward, grabbing Maya by the shoulder and shoving her hard toward the low railing at the platform's edge. The section closed off for maintenance, the section without the tall protective fencing the tourists were kept behind. Maya's feet skidded on the metal grating, her hands flying out instinctively as her body pitched forward over open air. 600 feet of empty sky and the entire city of Paris spinning below her. For one horrifying second, there was nothing beneath Maya's outstretched hands but wind. And that's exactly when everything changed forever. Maya's scream tore across the platform, but it was swallowed by the wind and the distant hum of the crowd on the main viewing deck below. Her body tilted over the railing, center of gravity gone, one hand grasping uselessly at empty air while the other caught, for one desperate second, the cold metal edge of the barrier. And then, a hand closed around her wrist. hard, unshakable. It wasn't Vivian's hand. It was Vivian's own hand that had shoved her. And now, in a moment nobody expected, including Maya, it was Vivian's other hand, along with her whole body weight thrown backward, that yanked Maya back over the railing and onto the platform floor, both women collapsing in a tangled heap of red silk and blue uniform. For a moment, neither of them moved. Maya lay gasping, heart slamming against her ribs, staring up at the sky she'd almost fallen into forever. Beside her, Vivian was breathing hard too, her perfect updo coming loose, mascara smeared beneath wide, shocked eyes. Eyes that looked, for the first time since Maya had met her, completely human. Vivian's voice broke. I didn't mean, I panicked, I just wanted you to stop, I didn't think. She pressed both hands over her mouth, shaking. Oh my God, I almost. Shouts erupted from the main platform as Daniel and Etienne came running. Having caught sight of the commotion, Maya scrambled backward against the railing, putting distance between herself and Vivian, chest heaving, adrenaline and terror and 15 years of buried grief crashing through her all at once. She has something of Rachel's. Vivian suddenly shouted toward the approaching crowd, pointing at Maya, her voice cracking into something desperate and wild. She attacked me, she. Stop, Maya said, and something in her own voice, flat, exhausted, finally unafraid, made Vivian actually fall silent. Just stop lying. For 15 years you've been lying. I'm done. Daniel reached them first, dropping to his knees beside Vivian. His face a mixture of confusion and alarm. What happened? Vivian, are you okay? Someone said you were both near the edge. She tried to push me off the tower, Maya said, loud enough now for everyone gathering around to hear, her voice shaking but clear. Because I found out who she really is. Her name isn't Vivian Cross. It's Nicole. And 15 years ago, my sister Rachel disappeared right after she started spending time with her. A stunned silence fell across the small crowd. Richard Whitfield, who had rushed up the stairs at the commotion, stood frozen, his face going pale. Daniel turned slowly to look at Vivian, his expression shifting from confusion to a dawning, horrified disbelief. That's insane, Vivian said, but her voice had lost all its polish now, cracking at the edges. Daniel, baby, she's making this up, she's clearly unstable, she just tried to. I have a photograph, Maya said, pulling the folded picture from her coat pocket with trembling hands, holding it up for everyone to see. Rachel and Nicole. 15 years ago. It fell out of Vivian's things yesterday, and the second she saw me holding it, she threatened me. Ask her where my sister is. Ask her why there's no record of Vivian Cross existing before 9 years ago. Ask her why she just tried to throw me off the Eiffel Tower rather than let me ask those questions in front of witnesses. Every eye turned to Vivian. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The mask that had held for 15 years, through a new name, a new face, a new life built on a foundation of erasure, finally publicly began to crumble. I didn't hurt her, Vivian whispered, tears cutting through her makeup now, all pretense gone. I swear to you, Daniel, I never hurt Rachel. She wanted to disappear. She was running from something, someone, back home, someone dangerous, and I helped her start over. New name, new city, new life, far away from Ohio. I gave her money. I helped her vanish because she asked me to. And then I realized, if she could become someone new, so could I. I'd spent my whole life being nobody, being nothing, and Nicole Ferris was never going to matter to anyone, so I became somebody else too. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I never meant for a family to spend 15 years grieving. Maya's knees nearly gave out beneath her. She's alive. Vivian looked up at her, mascara streaked down her face, and for the first time, something that looked almost like genuine remorse. She's alive. Last I knew a few years ago. Living under a different name in Oregon. I have an old contact and address, I can find it. Promise you, Maya. She's alive. The next 12 hours felt like the longest of Maya's life. Paris authorities were called to the tower, and what followed was a blur of statements, questions, translated explanations, and Daniel Whitfield standing pale and shattered beside a fiancée he suddenly didn't recognize. Vivian, or Nicole as Maya now made herself say, was taken in for questioning about the assault at the tower, though what mattered more to Maya, more than any charge or headline, was the information spilling out of her in broken, tearful fragments. 15 years ago, Rachel Bennett had been running from an abusive relationship back in Millbrook, Ohio. A boyfriend who had grown increasingly controlling, increasingly frightening, someone Rachel had been too ashamed and too scared to tell even her own sister about. Nicole, a young woman Rachel had met working the same waitressing job, had offered her an escape, a friend with a cousin in Oregon, a fresh start, a new identity to make sure the boyfriend could never track her down. Rachel had taken it. The note left in her apartment had, in fact, been written by Rachel herself, under Nicole's guidance, designed specifically so no one would search too hard. Had worked too well. Rachel had built a quiet new life far from Ohio, terrified that any contact, even with her own sister, might lead the wrong person back to her. And Nicole, watching how easily a person could vanish and become someone entirely new, had eventually done the same thing to herself, shedding a painful, poverty-stricken past for a version of herself gleaming enough to marry into a fortune. It was a plan built on real fear and real pain, but it had cost Maya and her mother 15 years of unimaginable grief, a mother who died never knowing her daughter was safe. Maya sat in a small Paris police station office at 2 a.m, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at a phone number Vivian, sobbing, stripped finally of every pretense, had given her. An old contact number, possibly years outdated, for the cousin in Oregon who might still know how to reach Rachel. Maya's hands shook so badly she had to set the coffee down before she could dial. It rang 4 times. 5. Maya's heart climbed into her throat with every unanswered ring, certain this was one more dead end in 15 years of dead ends. Then a woman's voice, groggy with sleep, answered. "Hello. I'm looking for someone," Maya said, voice breaking already. "I know this is going to sound strange, and it's the middle of the night, I'm sorry, but I'm looking for a woman named Rachel Bennett. She might be going by a different name now. She'd be about 31 years old, from Millbrook, Ohio." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then very quietly, "Who is this?" "My name is Maya. I'm her sister." The silence that followed lasted so long Maya thought the call had dropped. And then, through the phone, muffled and distant, she heard the woman on the other end say, to someone else in the room, in a voice trembling with disbelief, "Rachel. Rachel, wake up. It's your sister. Your sister is on the phone." Maya's whole body went numb. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers and hit the floor, forgotten. Around her, the police station kept moving. Officers walking past, phones ringing, the ordinary chaos of a Tuesday night, but Maya heard none of it. All she heard was rustling on the other end of the line, a chair scraping, footsteps, and then, after 15 years of silence, a voice she thought she would never hear again. "Maya!" Maya's legs gave out. She sank into the chair behind her, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak for several long seconds. "Maya, is that really you?" Rachel's voice cracked, thick with 15 years of buried tears of her own. "I've thought about calling you 1,000 times. I was so scared. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, I didn't know how to come back without putting you in danger. I didn't know if he was still." "He can't hurt you anymore," Maya managed to say through her own tears. "Rachel, Mom passed away 3 years ago. She never stopped believing you were out there. She never stopped hoping." There was a broken sound on the other end of the line, a sound of 15 years of grief and guilt finally breaking loose. I should have called, Rachel wept. I should have found a way. I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry. You're alive, Maya whispered, pressing her hand over her heart as if she could hold it together by force. That's all that matters right now. You're alive and I found you, and I am never letting you disappear again. Maya flew home from Paris 4 days later, not with the Whitfield family, but on her own ticket, purchased with money she didn't quite have, headed not to Connecticut but to Portland, Oregon, where her sister was waiting. She hadn't slept properly in days. The events at the Eiffel Tower had exploded across headlines within hours. Billionaire's fiancé detained after tower confrontation. Socialite's secret identity revealed. Housekeeper's sister missing 15 years, found alive, and Maya's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from reporters, from curious former neighbors, from people who'd never once cared about her before suddenly wanting to know everything. She ignored all of it. None of it mattered. Not the headlines, not the scandal consuming the Whitfield family, not even really what would happen to Vivian, Nicole, now facing serious charges both for the assault on the tower platform and for her role, however complicated and however born from good intentions gone wrong, in facilitating Rachel's disappearance under a legally gray identity fraud. All Maya could think about, the entire flight across the ocean and then across the country, was seeing her sister's face again. Rachel was waiting at the airport, standing nervously near the baggage claim, and when their eyes met across the crowded terminal, 15 years collapsed into nothing. Maya dropped her bag and ran, and Rachel ran too, and they collided in the middle of the terminal, holding on to each other so tightly it was as if they were both afraid the other might vanish again if they let go. "You look just like Mom," Rachel whispered into Maya's shoulder, both of them crying, oblivious to the strangers moving around them. "I missed you so much. Every single day I missed you. I never stopped looking," Maya said. "I never stopped believing you were out there. I just didn't know how to find you." They stood there for a long time, two sisters who had lost 15 years to fear and silence, finally back together. Over the following days, sitting in Rachel's small kitchen in a quiet Portland suburb, the sisters slowly filled in the missing years. Rachel had built a modest, careful life under a new name, working as a veterinary technician, keeping to herself, always glancing over her shoulder, always afraid the past might catch up to her. She'd never married, never let herself get close to anyone, terrified that intimacy meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant danger. 15 years of freedom had come at the cost of 15 years of isolation. "I used to imagine what you were doing," Rachel admitted one evening, wrapped in a blanket on her small porch, watching the Oregon rain. "I used to imagine you at Mom's for Sunday dinner, at your job, living your life. I told myself that not knowing meant I was protecting you. But really, I think I was just protecting myself from having to explain what happened to me. I was ashamed, Maya. Ashamed that I let someone control me like that. Ashamed that I ran instead of asking for help." "You didn't have to explain anything," Maya said softly. "You were scared. You survived. That's not something to be ashamed of. I just wish you'd trusted me enough to let me help you survive it, instead of surviving it alone." Rachel reached over and took her sister's hand. "I'm not alone anymore. Not ever again." That night, for the first time in 15 years, Maya slept without the ache of not knowing pressing against her chest. But there was still one more piece of the story that neither of them yet understood. A piece that, in the weeks to come, would reveal that Rachel's disappearance and Vivian's transformation into a Whitfield family fiancé were more connected than anyone at the Eiffel Tower had realized. 3 weeks after Paris, Maya received a phone call from a detective working the reopened case. Because once Vivian's confession at the tower became public, the Millbrook Police Department had no choice but to formally reopen Rachel's 15-year-old missing persons file, now recast not as an abandonment but as a case tangled up with abuse, identity fraud, and a decade and a half of silence. The detective's questions led to something neither Maya nor Rachel expected. Records showing that the man Rachel had fled 15 years ago. Her abusive ex-boyfriend, a man named Curtis Doyle, had, just 2 years after Rachel vanished, been convicted in a completely unrelated case of assaulting another young woman. He had served 8 years in prison and had been released only recently, resettling, disturbingly, in a small town less than 60 miles from where Rachel had been quietly living in Oregon. The realization sent a chill through both sisters. Nicole's insistence on secrecy 15 years ago, as reckless and painful as its methods had been, might genuinely have kept Rachel safe from a man who had gone on to hurt someone else. It didn't excuse the 15 years of grief inflicted on their mother, or the terror of that night on the tower, but it complicated the picture in a way Maya hadn't expected. Vivian Cross wasn't purely a villain. She was a frightened young woman who had once done something desperate to protect a friend, and who had then let that desperation curdle into a life built entirely on erasure and self-preservation. A life that, in the end, she'd been willing to protect by nearly costing an innocent woman her life 600 feet above Paris. Maya visited Vivian once, in the weeks before her legal proceedings began, in a quiet meeting room arranged through her lawyer. Vivian looked smaller somehow, stripped of the designer clothes and camera-ready polish, wearing simple clothes, her face bare. "I know sorry isn't enough," Vivian said quietly, unable to meet Maya's eyes at first. "I know I can't undo 15 years. But I need you to know, helping Rachel disappear, that part I'd do again. She was terrified, and I helped her survive something terrible. What I did wrong was afterward. Building my whole life on hiding, letting your family suffer so I wouldn't have to face what I'd become. And then, what I did on that tower." Her voice cracked. "I panicked. I've spent 15 years panicking every single day that someone would find out who I really was. And when you did, I didn't think, I just reacted, and I nearly..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Maya sat with that for a long moment. 15 years of anger, of grief, of imagining a villain to blame. And here in front of her was just a frightened, deeply flawed person, someone who had done one genuinely good thing a long time ago and then spent a decade and a half making increasingly desperate choices to protect a life built on that single lie. "I forgive the girl who helped my sister escape someone dangerous," Maya finally said. "I don't know yet if I can forgive the woman who tried to throw me off a tower to keep a secret. Maybe someday. Not today." It wasn't closure, not really. But it was honest, and for the first time in this entire story, honesty felt like enough. Back in Millbrook, Ohio, 6 weeks after Paris, Maya and Rachel stood together at their mother's grave for the first time in 15 years as two sisters, not one grieving alone. Rachel knelt and placed a bouquet of white lilies, their mother's favorite, against the headstone, her fingers tracing the engraved letters of a name she'd been too afraid to say out loud for so long. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'm sorry I let you spend your last years not knowing I was okay. I'm sorry I was too scared to come home." Maya knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her sister's shoulders. "She knew you were strong," Maya said softly. "She used to say it, even when she was crying about you. She'd say, 'Wherever she is, she's surviving.' I raised a survivor. She never stopped believing in you, Rachel. Not for one single day." They stayed there a long while, the autumn wind moving gently through the cemetery, two sisters finally grieving together instead of separately, finally healing a wound that had been open for 15 long years. In the months that followed, life slowly, carefully began to rebuild itself. Rachel made the difficult decision to move back closer to Ohio, taking a job at a veterinary clinic 20 minutes from Maya's apartment, close enough that Sunday dinners, real ones, together, at a small kitchen table instead of an empty chair, finally became possible again. Curtis Doyle, upon investigation prompted by the reopened case, was found to have violated the terms of his parole in ways connected to a new pattern of concerning behavior, and was returned to custody before he ever had the chance to come anywhere near Rachel again. It wasn't perfect justice for everything that had happened 15 years ago, but it was enough to let both sisters finally exhale. As for Vivian, Nicole, her case moved slowly through the courts. Daniel Whitfield ended the engagement within a week of returning from Paris, devastated and humiliated but, according to family friends, more heartbroken over the lie itself than the scandal it created. Nicole eventually pled to lesser charges related to the assault at the tower, receiving probation and mandated counseling rather than prison time, the judge acknowledging both the genuine harm she'd caused and the complicated, frightened history that had led her there. She disappeared from public life entirely. No more magazine covers, no more galas. This time not into a new stolen identity, but as far as anyone could tell, into the quiet, difficult work of finally facing who she really was. Maya, for her part, quietly resigned from her position at the Whitfield estate. She didn't need the job as a way to stay close to a mystery anymore. The mystery was solved. Her sister was home. But there was one more twist still waiting. One final piece of the story that would remind both sisters just how much their 15 years apart had shaped who they'd each become, and just how far Maya herself had been willing to go, quietly, patiently, without anyone ever fully realizing it was Rachel who finally asked the question, nearly 4 months after Paris, over coffee on a quiet Sunday morning. "I need to know something," Rachel said, turning her mug slowly between her hands. "You took that housekeeping job at the Whitfield estate the moment you saw Vivian's engagement photo in a magazine. You worked there for 4 months, cleaning silver and folding laundry for a family you'd never met, just on the chance that the woman in that photo might be connected to me. Maya, that's not just love. That's not just determination. What made you so sure? Everyone else believed I'd run away. Even Mom some days when the grief got too heavy. What made you so certain for 15 years that something else had happened?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, turning the question over. "Because I know you," she finally said. "I know you never once, not one time in your whole life, left a room without calling out where you were going. Even as a kid. Even when you were furious at Mom and stormed out, you'd call 20 minutes later just to say you were okay. A person like that doesn't just leave a note and vanish. I knew in my gut from the very first day that something didn't add up. And I decided a long time ago that I would rather spend the rest of my life chasing a feeling in my gut than spend it accepting an easy answer that never felt true." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You gave up so much for that feeling. Your time, your peace, probably your dating life, knowing you." She laughed wetly. 15 years, Maya. "I'd give 15 more," Maya said simply. "You're my sister. There was never a version of this story where I stopped looking." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have finally, fully found their way back to each other. Outside, the Ohio sky was clear and blue, an ordinary Sunday morning in an ordinary town, made extraordinary only by the fact that both sisters were sitting in it, together, alive, safe. Maya thought in that quiet moment about how strange it was that a fall from 600 feet above Paris, a moment of terror she would carry with her for the rest of her life, had ultimately been the thing that cracked open 15 years of silence and finally brought her sister home. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is also the moment everything you've been fighting for finally breaks through. She thought about her mother, who never got to see this reunion, who died still hoping. And she thought about Vivian, Nicole, a woman who had made one brave choice and 1,000 fearful ones afterward, whose story was a warning about what happens when a person builds an entire life on a foundation of hiding rather than facing what happened to them. Maya realized, watching her sister laugh again for the first time in years, that the real twist of this story wasn't the confrontation on the tower, or the stolen photograph, or even the reveal of Nicole's true identity. The real twist was this. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one with money or power or a famous last name. Sometimes it's the quiet person in the corner, the one nobody notices, the one who never stopped believing, never stopped watching, never stopped waiting for the truth to surface. No matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. 1 year after that terrifying afternoon atop the Eiffel Tower, Maya stood in her own small backyard in Ohio. String lights glowing overhead, a modest gathering of friends and family scattered across the lawn. It wasn't a fancy party. There was no professional photographer, no designer gowns, no magazine covers waiting to capture the moment. Just paper plates, a homemade cake, and the people who mattered most. Rachel stood beside her, laughing at something their aunt had said. Sunlight catching in her hair the same way it had when they were teenagers on that porch swing 15 years ago. She looked lighter now, freer, like a person who had finally set down a weight she'd been carrying for a decade and a half. Maya watched her sister laugh and felt something settle deep in her chest. A peace she hadn't known in 15 years, a wholeness that no amount of money or fame or perfect Parisian light could ever have given her. She thought about everything it had taken to get here. The quiet years of grief. The 4 months of scrubbing silver in a stranger's mansion. Waiting, watching, hoping for a single thread of truth. The terrifying seconds suspended over the Paris skyline. Certain her life was about to end. The phone call in a police station at 2 in the morning that changed everything. It had cost her comfort, time, and countless sleepless nights. But standing here now, watching her sister blow bubbles for their young cousin, watching her laugh freely under a string of lights in their own backyard, Maya understood something she would carry with her forever. Love that refuses to give up is the most powerful force in the world. It doesn't announce itself with headlines or magazine covers. It doesn't need a fortune behind it. It simply keeps showing up, day after day, year after year, refusing to let go of hope even when everyone else has moved on. If there's one thing this story has taught us, it's this. Never underestimate the quiet person who keeps searching. Never assume that grief without answers means the story is over. And never ever stop believing in the people you love. No matter how many years pass, no matter how far away they seem, no matter how impossible the odds look. Because sometimes the truth is waiting exactly where you least expect it. Behind a stranger's smile, inside an old photograph, at the top of a tower on the other side of the world. And sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough, patient enough, and stubborn enough to never stop looking. To everyone watching this story tonight, if it touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you of someone you love, someone you've never stopped hoping for, take a moment right now to reach out to them. Life is short, and love like Maya's is rare and precious. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It truly helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe so you never miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about never giving up, share this with them today. Thank you for staying until the very end. Until next time, keep believing, keep hoping, and never stop looking for the people you love.